Thanks for coming today to this, which is the first of a series of EdTPA workshops as we begin this launch and work towards our pilot this fall. I'm super excited to introduce to you Lisa Palmer from Illinois State University, who is the EdTPA coordinator on that campus and has been a tremendous resource to us as we pull together the organization, the materials, to get set for this workshop. So just in case some of you don't know, my name is Will Conco-Behrens. I'm the director of the Teacher Leader Center, this space, along with Carrie Vogel-Jazang, who's my associate director. We, along with folks like John Akazoglu, right here, Evans, Ochala, and the Office of Ed Services, who coordinates field experiences, will be working really closely together over the course of the next several months to really work toward this launch in the fall and make sure we have the resources. I think, though, with that said, we know that anytime we transition and start something new, it feels uncomfortable, it feels slightly nerve-wracking, it feels sometimes scary, etc. But I think as I look across this room, I see a really, really awesome team of people who know their stuff, of people who are excited to do what's right and what's best for our students. And so, I think it's just going to be an awesome experience for us, and hopefully we will grow as a program as a result. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Elisa to get us started. Thanks.
All
Can
right.
you join me and actually help it?
Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. I was told I had quite the honor of being the inaugural presentation in this space, which is just more added pressure for me, right? I warn you, if for about the first 45 minutes, I'm going to do more talking than I will the rest of our time together. Does that make sense? So just keep in mind, if we're about 20 minutes in, you're like, oh my word, she will not stop talking. I will, I promise. So we just have some information to get through, and then we'll go from there. Let's see if I can get this going here. Come on. Or not. All right. Just a couple of things. Here's our agenda. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my experience with EdTPA, where we are in that process over at Illinois State, etc., just to give you some ideas. We're going to be looking at the design of the assessment, and then we're going to go into work time, where we're going to be looking at Task 1, Task 2, and Task 3. The purpose of today is to get you starting to look at the assessment, and we'll actually build on that the next time that we're together. So who am I? I'm the EdTPA coordinator at Illinois State University. Just to give you a little background about our university, we're the #1 producer of teachers in the state of Illinois. We have about 5,000 education majors on our campus, which makes up 25% of our university. Our majors are housed in 5 different colleges. So we have College of Ed, College of Applied Science and Technology, College of Arts and Sciences, College of Fine Arts, and College of Business. So I work as the coordinator with 5 different colleges, 29 undergraduate programs, and I have 900 to 1,000 student teachers a year. So just to give you some perspective. And actually that was one of the reasons that Will and Carrie kind of brought me over, was I understand big schools. I understand working across colleges and those types of things, because it's what I have to do every day with my university. So I'm a former secondary science teacher. I taught high school science for 10 years. And then Illinois State asked me to come over and be the biology education coordinator. I did that for 8 years. And then I was asked to be the coordinator for EdTPA for the entire university. And we'll get to that transition in just a moment. I am a national EdTPA consultant. I don't work with many groups simply because my campus keeps me pretty busy, but this was actually an opportunity I couldn't turn down. Being another large campus, spread out, I felt like I had some things to offer to you all that would be a really good fit.
Lisa, I'm sorry to pause for
That's
just
all right.
1 second. We just seem to have a rush of folks showing up.
Sure.
I don't want to interrupt you.
No problem.
Can you just pause for 1 second?
I can.
Okay, so we just got out of the
Oh, no problem. We're just glad that you're here. By the way, I have to say, as people are coming in, I'm very excited to see so many anticipatory faces, I'll put it that way, understanding that this is the first week of classes for you all, which is a little exhausting in and of itself, right? We're on Friday. So very, very happy to have you all here. I'm laughing because the recording is going to be, all of a sudden you're going to hear all this rustling of bags. Oh, it's quite all right. I'm good.
It's everybody.
And then they came. I have that happen in my schedule where I have a meeting and then another meeting afterwards, and I forget that I have to go somewhere in between, like travel. I forget to leave travel time, or my schedule doesn't allow it.
We're back behind.
But no judgment, right? All right. And just to pick up, I'm also a scorer for secondary science. So that's actually the only content area that I'm qualified to score in because that's my area of expertise. So I do occasionally score portfolios. I'm just going to give up on this. All right, so my TPA story. So I think it's important to get some perspective. I was exactly where you all are 4 years ago. So I actually just kind of celebrated my 4th anniversary with TPA. Little did I know that it would have such a big impact on my kind of professional life. In Illinois, we were told in fall 2011 that the state legislature was going to be passing legislation requiring a performance-based assessment as the exit exam for teacher licensure. You can imagine in some ways how happy we were to hear that. We were a little, at the time, we actually had exit standardized exam called the Assessment for Professional Teaching. And when they were talking about this performance-based assessment, they were not talking about taking away that test. They were talking about having the students do both. And we were like, oh my word. So anyways, but one of the things they asked 3 universities in the state to kind of pilot one of the exams they were looking at to see if we liked it or not, one of the assessments. So our Associate Dean, Amy Adkins, which if you ever get involved in the world of TPA, you'll hear her name quite a bit. She asked at a Council for Teacher Education meeting, which is our governing body at Illinois State, she said, would anybody pilot this assessment? I was a representative from the College of Arts and Sciences, and I never told my students this, but I raised my hand and I said, well, we'll pilot it. Partially because I'm always of the basis that if you're going to criticize something, you should always criticize from a basis of knowledge. And I thought, well, before I tell them what a terrible idea this is, let me pilot it so I can actually back that with evidence, right? So we went into the semester, literally knew nothing about the assessment. I sat down with 3 student teachers. We had about 15 in biology that semester. I was supervising 3 of them. So I thought, okay, I will take these 3, and we're going to do TPA. And I sat down with them, and I said, ladies, don't worry, they were all girls. And I said, ladies, we are going to walk through this particular assessment. This is what we're doing for the semester. I don't know anything about this. We will learn together, etc. So between that kind of little introduction and buying them dinner at Panera about once every 3 weeks, we got through it. It was also, they were 3 very good student teachers. They were in year-long internships. So for them, they were very capable students. So I thought this is a great group to start with. So we got to the end of that pilot semester, and I met with the other groups. There was 3 programs that were piloting in secondary ed. It was world languages, mathematics, and biology. And we got together and we said, well, what do you think? And I said, it's a pretty good assessment. I said, not only does it look at some things we really want to look at, not only does it give us some very clear performance expectations, it's also looking at some things we should be looking at and we haven't been looking at. And that was a very profound moment for us. So I thought, okay, I've done this with my student teachers who I knew would do well regardless, right? Now let's do it with all the student teachers. So I don't know how, if student teaching is a spring-only thing for you guys, or if you do it fall-spring, or if it depends on program. We do fall-spring for most of our programs. So I had a fall group. My fall groups tend to be smaller. I only had 5 of them. And so I did this with this 5, and it was an interesting semester. And they did well again. I mean, they did, there were a lot of questions, a lot of things. There was terminology they didn't know because they hadn't had the preparatory work yet, because at that time we weren't doing the preparatory work. But we went through and I said, okay, again, we're seeing kind of the same pattern that we saw in the spring. And then in the spring of 2013, we did it with all our student teachers. There were 18 of them. And that was the first time I was not the supervisor for all of them. And so that was another new experience, was providing them support with myself not being the supervisor and figuring out how to support my supervisors and that type of thing. So at the end of that particular session, the College of Education said, hey, you know a lot about this assessment. We are actually coming to a point where starting in fall 2013, we now were 2 years away from this being high stakes for our students. We were going to start an all-campus pilot. And meaning every student teacher on our campus was going to have to complete an EdTPA portfolio in order to graduate. They didn't have to pass it, but they had to complete it. So we went from, we originally started in spring 2012 with 3 programs, 4 with the elementary ed. So 3 external to the College of Ed, 1 in the College of Ed. We had 4 programs. In the fall, we had 7 programs. And in the spring, we had 14 programs piloting. Now we were going to have all 29 piloting. And they said, we really need someone full-time to help coordinate all of this. So they asked me to come over. So I started in June 2013 with EdTPA support. We actually did 2 years of full piloting. We sent about 70% of our portfolios for external scoring, used that data quite a bit to calibrate how our faculty were viewing the portfolios versus how they were being scored. We also used that data to identify areas where our faculty needed professional development and where we needed to embed certain EdTPA-related experiences and language into coursework. So at the end of that 2-year pilot, we just finished our first semester of high stakes for our teacher candidates. So this was the first semester where they had to pay for the assessment, they had to pass it in Illinois in order to get licensed, etc. And at that point in time, so you can imagine myself opening those score reports, right? Because we knew how they had performed coming into this, and we had used that data to determine, okay, what percentage do we think will need retakes, what type of retakes will they have to do, etc. I mean, this is an advantage of having a science person, because I was all about the data, right, and going through things. But anyways, when we got to it, this past fall, we actually had 225 candidates complete the portfolio. We had a 99% pass rate. So, which was really great. Thank you. So, we were very excited about that. We had 3 candidates who did not pass. 2 of them have decided to do the retake on the EdTPA. Come to find out, one of them had kind of decided he didn't want to be a teacher anyways, and not passing EdTPA gave him an out with his parents. So that was really interesting to find out behind the scenes. So, yes. His department, though, did not appreciate him messing up their pass rate. But anyways, so that was an interesting type of thing. So along the way, I've worked with New York quite a bit. I collaborate with Georgia quite a bit, mostly via distance, simply because you'll probably hear me mention her. I have a 10-year-old daughter, and she notices when I'm gone. So I try not to do too much travel when I don't have to. So anyways, that's kind of my EdTPA story. It's also kind of the story of ISU. I'm fortunate enough to work with leadership that really was intentional about the implementation. Not every university in Illinois had that foresight. I get the feeling over here you all are kind of working with leadership with the same kind of foresight. Take advantage of that you have learning opportunities to really be able to look into the assessment closely, be intentional about implementation, and really walk through things. And I am going to be with you through this journey to help you build those skills. So, I don't know why I keep picking this up. It's not working. You would think I would learn, right? Okay, so this is kind of, and this may change depending on what we come out of today with and what happens in the future. So today we're going to do a version of the Diving Deeper workshop. We're going to start to get into the rubrics. We're going to start looking at things. February 19th, we have scheduled a local evaluation training. So my goal, by the time you come out of those 2 workshops, is to have experience with the whole portfolio, to have looked into every rubric to really get a good idea of what the performance expectations are. A work session on March 25th, and then determining next steps. And again, some of those things may get switched around based on collaboration and what's going on. So I'll be working closely with several of you and to look at what's going on. A few housekeeping things. So you got several emails as we were putting this all together. Thank you for your patience with that. And I have to say thank you to Will for handling all of my emails, saying, oh, this might be good, and oh, we need to do this, especially in the middle of a move. with everything that's going on. These are these agreements. So here's why these agreements are really important, these materials use agreements. You have been given access to portfolios that our students created. Okay? Our students share those with us for the purpose of professional development, but they can only be used for sessions like this. If a colleague of yours was not here, you cannot share that portfolio with them. Does that make sense? So it really is a confidentiality issue. We're going to be using the same portfolios for today and the same portfolio for our next time as well. So we'll be leaving those in the Dropbox for the duration of that time period. But my candidates entrust me to use these in a professional manner with that. The other thing is the EdTPA materials. So like the handbooks and everything you can share with your colleagues, they always have to be kept password protected. So you cannot post them on a website that is not password protected. Make sense? They're copyrighted materials. It's a little like the final exam, right? You can share the final exam with other people. You can share as you start to implement, you can share handbooks with candidates. Feel free. They just can't post them on websites and that type of thing. Everything has to be kept password protected. Carrie and Will be coming around to collect these once we go to break in our first work session. So just hang on to those for right now. All right. As questions arise, so you're going to have a lot of questions today. Some of them are going to be on topic, and some of them will be off topic. If they're off topic questions that don't pertain to exactly what we're doing at the moment, I put Post-its on your table for those. I'll be around during each work session to pick up Post-its. Some of the questions I may be able to answer right as we come off a break. Other ones I'm going to keep, and we're going to reflect on those and look at what changes we need to make, what information I can get to you, etc. Make sense? If it's a content-specific question, if you want to put your email address under the question, I can email you directly what the answer is for your particular content area. So after I ask my people, because sometimes I don't know. This young lady here, we were talking, and she said she was in elementary reading, correct? And I would say talk about a topic I could know less about, elementary reading. Sometimes we're in professional development sessions, and we're doing academic language, and we're reviewing portfolios, and I turn to my LED people. I'm like, is that a literacy strategy? And I'm like, teach the science person something, please. So are we good so far? Well, that was interesting. I have to tell you all, so Scale, the EdTPA is owned by Stanford University. I almost said the Stanford University, but we get enough with that with the Ohio State, correct? So just to let you know, I am a Big Ten girl. I actually grew up in Wisconsin, which also makes me a Badgers fan. Sorry. I know, right? I was doing really well till I admitted that. But anyways, a colleague of mine is actually an alum of this fine institution, and so she was like, aren't you excited? You get to go, and I'm like, yes, I'm very excited. I'm not sure I have your passion yet, but anyway, so the Stanford Center for Assessment, Learning, and Equity are actually the designers and owners of the assessment. So when I come in and enroll the consultant, there are certain PowerPoints they like me to use. I've adapted it for what we're doing today, but every once in a while, if I'm awkward on a slide or if there's a lot of writing, just not my fault. I'm just going to put that out there. For those of you who are especially into PowerPoints and the rules. Wow.
We had a noon whistle and a 5 whistle.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but have a
there you go. That's right. Every campus has their thing, yes. I thought I'd see a mad exit out of buildings, right? Also not easily distracted. So anyways, EdTPA, it's really designed to be a capstone assessment. We're in a system where you actually have multiple assessments going on. And that's one of the things that, working with my faculty, we have really worked hard to emphasize, is that we have formative assessments in our programs along the way. And when a student is ready to be licensed, EdTPA is just one piece that we look at in that overall assessment plan. Does that make sense? So really keep that in mind as you're going along. I am sure you have your own campus design formative assessments. I have heard you have an e-portfolio that students work on along the way. That type of thing still exists as you go through a system where then you have EdTPA as a capstone assessment. And one of the things that you'll look at is what are the interactions between those? How will these all work together? You've got, the observations by the professional educators. the licensure exams that are required. And then what ends up happening is EdTPA has 5 strands in it: planning, instruction, assessment, analysis of teaching, and academic language. And we'll look at how those work together through assessment over the next 2 workshops to kind of get an idea of how this all works together. As we go through the next 2 sessions, you're going to want to be keeping these questions in mind. You know, what is it that we want our candidates to be able to do? What are we already doing in our programs that's EdTPA related? How do we see this relating to it? And so I would highly encourage you, especially for those of you who printed out your EdTPA handbooks and everything, write notes in the rubrics. If you have specific assignments that would relate to this, or if you have specific activities or courses that do this, write those notes in the handbook so you keep kind of a running idea of, oh, this is this. So as you go to put this all together, saying, well, as we align things or as we look at things, this already relates to this. Maybe we need to change a verbiage that we use a little bit, but overall this is going very well. What's new or different? I'll tell you right now, for us, academic language. Most of my programs did not overtly address academic language in their preparation of teacher candidates. And academic language is key to working with English language learners. So it was actually good for us because it really gave us a practical way to help prepare our teacher candidates to work with English language learners, even if they had very little experience with them in some of their clinical settings. And so that was extremely helpful. The other thing we found new or different was feedback. We realized I had been a cooperating teacher for 5 years before coming to the university. I had been a supervisor of student teachers for 8 years, a teacher of methods of teaching biology for 8 years. I had given my students copious amounts of feedback, so I had modeled it very well. Never once did I ask a student teacher when I was their cooperating teacher, or a student teacher when I was their supervisor, or a method student in my clinical. I always asked them, show me the assessment you're going to give students. Never once did I ask them, what feedback are you going to give the students, and how will you help them use that feedback to improve their learning? And what's important about that is research shows us that quality feedback and then the ability of students to use that feedback is one of the #1 equalizing factors in the classroom in terms of enabling students to perform at a higher level. And so once we realize that, those are, you can tell what our 2 big foci are right now. We're really working on academic language and feedback in the classroom as 2 of our major initiatives. EdTPA is a common architecture, so all of you have a handbook that's specific to your content area, and it has similarities and it has differences. This is one of the things I actually liked about the assessment. Our students took the assessment for professional teaching. It was a standardized multiple choice test with an essay. Everyone took the same test. It was K through 12. So it didn't look different for science. It didn't look different for math. It didn't look different for anyone. Here in EdTPA, you have your own content-specific handbook that's going to reflect, especially in certain rubrics, what your discipline values. So, for example, in science, it's all about inquiry and using data and those types of things. In English, it is about supporting arguments with text examples. I can only pull these out if I've recently worked with a program. So I work with 20 different handbooks, so sometimes it takes me a while to remember who has what. But this is kind of one of the things that as we looked at the assessment, we really liked about it. Some of these slides I'm just going to let you read on your own because they're long. And now the entire system's revolting on me. All right. Come on.
Like it's freezing?
Yeah. It froze. Luckily I didn't. So we'll just go from there. Yes, I don't know. I did it in.
Nope.
Oh, hey, there we go. Well, what did you do?
I just touched it. Magic fingers. Right here, friends.
It's like a healing just happened. And again, you can see up here, these are just some of the things that candidates will have to do during the assessment. And you have the PowerPoint was sent to you. I'll let you digest that at will. Just to give, for those of you who are visual, you like the graphics, here's kind of a visual presentation of the assessment itself. We have task 1, which is planning, task 2, which is instruction, task 3, which is assessment. Notice what is at the center of everything. Student learning. Your candidates are going to talk a lot about the students in the class, why the lessons they're designing are important for these students, why these are the best choices for this particular group of students. When you get to instruction, they're going to have to talk about how the video shows them engaging students in learning, how they have deepened student learning. There's also a subject-specific pedagogy, which is literally the name of the rubric, is subject-specific pedagogy. And it's the one unique thing to each discipline that was kind of brought out there. And so it'll be interesting to see what you think about the subject-specific pedagogy for your content area. And then in assessment, they're going to analyze student learning. Now, one of the things I want to clarify is the assessment task 3, is not a student growth model. It is not I gave them the pre-test, here's the post-test, look how much better they got, aren't I a great teacher? It really looks at the teacher candidate's ability to analyze student learning and then respond appropriately. So they're going to take an assessment, one assessment from this 3 to 5 lessons that they have planned. They're going to take one assessment. They're going to analyze the student performance on that assessment. They are then going to take 3 student work samples and show the feedback they gave students. And they're going to talk about what their next steps are for instruction based on what the performance they saw in that assessment. So it's not a student growth model. And here's why this is important. It doesn't matter what type of student teaching setting they're in when they do EdTPA. And I think that's very important to understand. That was a big concern of my faculty. We have found, as we look at about 18,000 students submitted portfolios for official scoring last year. They had 5 choices to indicate what type of setting they were in. So it was urban, suburban, rural, or rural. Try saying that fast. Anyways, any ideas which one of those settings had the highest mean portfolio score?
Rural.
Urban.
Oh.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising to us as well. And so the assessment is very contextual. Students will actually fill out a context for learning, which we'll get to in a little while, that actually talks about the community they're in, the school that they're in, and the students they're working with, and identifying what needs they have, etc. And then everything is based around the context of the school and learning. So, for example, in Rubric 6, which we'll look at today, it talks about a learning environment that shows respect and rapport. Respect and rapport can look different in 2 different schools. And that's where that context comes into play. Does that make sense? And so same with then the analysis of learning. It wasn't about, we had students that were at some really underperforming high schools and elementary schools that did really well on the assessment task because they knew how to analyze student learning and they knew how to respond. And that's what it was looking at. It was not looking at student growth. And I don't know how things are in Iowa, but we're kind of moving towards a student growth model as part of teacher analysis or teacher evaluations in Illinois. So that was a big concern, and this is not a student growth model. Make sense? All right, good. All right, so you can kind of see there then. You'll notice that here this kind of goes with, again, they're going to spend a lot of time talking about these 3 to 5 lessons. It's called the learning segment. It's a series of lessons that are focused around the same, what they call central focus. For those of you who are who work with secondary level students, sometimes they're like, does that mean I have to have a 3 to 5 day unit? No, that means it could be 3 to 5 lessons at the beginning of the unit, the middle of the unit, or the end of the unit. You can pull it out from a larger unit. So I guess that would happen at the elementary level too. So sorry, elementary people, sometimes I speak secondary and I apologize. So just correct me. Just do it kindly, please. I mean, I am from out of state. So plans based on context and knowledge about what students bring. And again, that's what I want to emphasize. It really is about teacher candidates knowing their students and making choices through the light of what is best for these students to learn this particular content. And they're going to put together this portfolio. One of the reasons I had talked about these 3 to 5 days, they're going to spend a lot of time pondering about these 3 to 5 days. So sometimes when I talk to candidates after they've submitted, we're chatting, and they tend to be very open with me because I don't grade them at all, so therefore they can be a little more free. And so, we're chatting, and they're like, yeah, Mrs. Palmer, I never want to teach this topic again. Okay, I get that. You'll feel better in 4 months, right? You've just spent a lot of time thinking about the Greeks versus the Romans for a while. All right, and you can see here it's subject specific. So here are just some examples. You'll notice that the elementary literacy is they really look at strategies for comprehending or composing text. That's kind of the central skill that they're going to be referring to time and time again. Secondary history, social studies, facts, concepts, interpretations or analyses to build and support arguments, etc. And so this was one of the things that we worked. Ooh. Did you all know this did this? You had me coming back here this whole time? Really? Yeah, just because I'm from Illinois, right? Or it was the Badgers thing that brought us.
Also have magic fingers.
Apparently, right? Yay.
Because you told me you were a Badgers fan.
That's what it was. Oh, man, I should have kept that to myself. Anyways, this is kind of what it's going to look like. And one of the reasons we wanted to look at a whole portfolio today in terms of all the tasks is to give you an idea of the artifacts that candidates will create. So in planning, they do a context for learning, which gives the instructional and social context, lesson plans, instructional materials, assessments, and then a planning commentary. And these commentaries, there's a commentary for each task. In the planning one, they will answer a series of questions that talks about their reasoning behind the plans that they're making. Each one of those aligns with a rubric, and we'll take a look at that in a little bit. In instruction, they're going to do a video clip or video clips of their teaching, depending on which handbook it is, and then an instruction commentary where they're going to talk about how their video provides evidence of certain things. And then in assessment, again, analysis of the whole class, analysis of learning and feedback to selected focus students, and then an assessment commentary as well as they go through. Oh, now it's not going to work. What did I do last time? Oh, you guys took it back. And it froze. Will.
Touch it.
Which one?
What is on the left?
On the left. Your left or my left? Nah, yeah.
I think it is frozen. Hold on.
I think it is
This
frozen.
is new, working out new things in a new space. Magic fingers. No way.
The comedic relief, free of charge. So, and in the commentaries, this just kind of goes about what I talked about. So, oh my. You know, I have friends who are EdTPA coordinators, and I said, I'm going over to Iowa, and they said, oh, good luck. And I'm like, oh, it'll be fine. Wait till I talk to him tonight. I was just planning on a glass of wine when I get home, but now, just teasing. All right. The structure of the handbook. So let me tell you something about the handbooks. Have you noticed, for those of you who printed it out and looked at it, it's pretty long, isn't it? It's a very technical manual. I will tell you that at the point in time where this becomes where your students need to pass it in order to complete their program, in order to get licensed, that should not be the first time they see the handbook. So they should at least have experience with the handbook prior to the student teaching semester once you get into full implementation mode. Because it is a technical manual. It has all the details they need to know about completing the assessment, but that doesn't make it easy to read and to understand at times. But this is how it structures. It has an introduction, and the introduction and overview chart are really nice to get a glimpse of really what's expected from each task, what's going on, and then it has in-depth descriptions for task 1 and 3. One of the things I don't have on here, at the end there's a glossary, which is very helpful. There's also an evidence chart that talks about what formats are acceptable for each piece of evidence that they're going to be submitting. That becomes important later on. Here's kind of as they go through, each one of the sections is structured as to what do I need to think about, what do I need to do, what do I need to write, and how will it be assessed. And then you can see there are the additional things that are in each particular handbook. So, that just sounds like some great summer reading, doesn't it? Sit down with the handbook. Okay. Here's the context for learning, and we talked about this. One of the reasons the context for learning is so important is this is where they identify students with IEPs or 504s and what their accommodations are. They also identify other specific learning needs. This was interesting for our students because our students were not used to identifying groups of learners that do not have a legal document attached to them. And so as we started talking about what are the other learners in your classroom, how do you support their needs, individuals like struggling readers who don't have an IEP or 504 but are still going to need extra support, it really helped our discussions of differentiation because they often saw differentiation as just a special ed thing. And we were able to then take it a step further and talk about what other groups of learners do you have. Not my picture. All right. So there are 15 rubrics in EdTPA, and they have what are called these 5 components of teaching. And so if you take a look, the planning rubrics are all located in the planning task, and they're specifically rubric 1, 2, and 5. Instruction rubrics, assessment rubrics, the analyzing teaching. By the way, all of those analyzing teaching rubrics, they have to provide research or theory to support what they're saying, which is interesting. That was another thing we found our candidates struggled on, is to actually tie their decision-making to research and theory. And then you can see academic language there, and that's kind of how that's all structured out. Rubric progress. Every rubric is set up where a 1 is they're not ready, 5 they're highly accomplished, and depending on what the rubric is looking at, you'll notice that at level 1, some of them, it's really that they're focused on themselves. It's a little like sometimes when our students first watch themselves teach, who are they watching? Themselves, right? And their number one comment, does anybody know what their number one comment? They have 2 things they look at when they first watch themselves on video.
Their hair.
Their hair, what they're wearing, and their voice. That's exactly it. So, our sophomores, as they videotape themselves, sometimes it's just peer teaching, sometimes it's in our laboratory schools. Anyways, the first set of reflections you get were like, what changes would you make? And they're like, I'm never wearing that skirt again. Not exactly what we're looking for. So anyways, that is a developmental process in and of itself, right? So anyways, yes, teacher focused. And then you'll notice as we get to highly accomplished, we're really looking at what's going on with the students. It's all about the students. Whole class, I see them, I have 3rd graders, they are 3rd graders, right? Or do I see them as individual learners with individual needs? And am I really striving to meet those? This one is my favorite. Do we see someone who things are jumping around and it just isn't quite coming together? Or do we see someone who had intentional planning and then was able to execute it well? Or if there were execution errors, they can identify those errors and talk about what they would change next time. Basically, do we see someone who only has moments of brilliance but has no idea how they got there? Or do we see someone who actually intentionally planned for the moments of brilliance? You are like, I might be in that category right now. I don't know. Here's kind of what the EdTPA rubrics look like. So level 1 for all of them, seriously struggling candidate. Level 2, possibly ready, still needs a little bit of work. Level 3, qualified to teach. Level 4, solid foundations. Level 5, advanced skills. So if we take a look at EdTPA, did you all catch how many rubrics? 15, right? 3 tasks, 5 rubrics per task. All right. So a level 3 or higher is what we call kind of the proficient candidate. So what's an ideal score on EdTPA? A what or higher? A 3 on each rubric, which would be a 45. 45 or higher is kind of a key. So just to give you an idea of scoring, the scale last year, after they did a 4-year national pilot of the assessment, and they did apparently all the data people got together and collaborated and looked at the performance, and they came out and they said they had a recommended range of scores from either 35 to 42. And as states were implementing, they recommended scores, start scores starting, no lower than 35, but no higher than 42, and really state cutoff scores being no higher than 42. So this might actually give you a little bit of about Illinois State's 99% pass rate, because our cut score in Illinois right now is a 35.
Ours will be 41.
41. Okay. So so that is really important for you all to know.
The 25th percentile.
Right. Yes. Now, I'll tell you what our average portfolio score is in Illinois State. Our average portfolio score is a 47. So we are averaging well above. So the way Illinois has done it, they've given us 5 years to get to our top cut score will be a 41. We're going to be hitting that in 2019, 2020. So we have 2 years at a 35, then we jump to a 37, and then to a 39, and then to a 41. So we're a scaled up approach model in ours. Yes?
World language has 13 rubrics, so do we know what the cut score will be for world language? It doesn't have 15 rubrics.
Yeah. So and that's something for the state of Iowa to consider.
Has the state of Iowa considered that yet?
I imagine they have because of when I'm looking at literacy, the options for elementary, they recognize it depends on the number of rubrics. So
Yeah.
I guess they would find that out.
So that'll be something clever. Like in Illinois right now, it's 31, and I think it's going to be 37. We did a 2 on each of those rubrics, so -4. So they're always 4 points behind.
Percentile, whatever it would be.
Yeah. So yeah, I know. Now you all cannot make jokes about world language being 2 rubrics short of a full portfolio. That is not kind. So I'm just teasing world language. I tease mine all the time. All right. So anyways, what we're going to do is I'm going to actually go through. So here's math. Okay. So secondary math, rubric 9. This is that subject-specific pedagogy. And in math, the question is, how does the candidate use representations to develop students' understanding of mathematical concepts and procedures? So here's a level 1. You'll notice at a level 1, the candidate really doesn't pay attention to concepts. They're just going through facts and procedures. Who cares if the kids actually understand what they're doing, right? As long as they can, is it called plug and chug? Is that what they call it? Yes. All right. Or uses them inappropriately. Those are the 2 things. All right. So that's a 1. Yeah, they're not ready. They are not ready to be the teacher of learning. In fact, when I present to candidates, I call that the dangerous to practice side. That children could actually lose learning in this area with you as the teacher, if that's where you're at. As a parent, So how many of you just had a face flash into your mind of someone you've known who is a level 1? I know, right? We're not going to share that information. But, my daughter's in 5th grade, and she's very fortunate. She has 2 parents who are college educated. My husband is a K-12 PE teacher. I'm in science. Oh, I was in science. Now he asks me all the time, what is it you do? But anyway, I tell him I work in assessment. Just say that. So anyways, if she had a poor teacher, she would have enough of a support system that we could get her caught up and everything. But most children don't have that. And it may be where, listen, they get 1 chance at 3rd grade, and they can't afford to indulge you while you're just still kind of monkeying around with, do I want to do this, not do this, let's just do this today. They can't afford to lose that year of learning. All right, so here's what I'm going to have you all do. These are the other 4 rubric levels. And what I would like you to do is at your table, put them in the order that you think they go. Okay? It is the first quiz. How exciting is this?
Did you get that?
What?
Yeah, they just dump so much stuff.
I know.
Alright, I have my.
Do you have release forms?
I'll give you this one as well, because I took it as my example.
Okay, do you need
Oh, no, I'm good. I have water back there, yes. Thank you for fixing my computer.
I'm sorry, from 2 Do you need one, Evans?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that. I think they probably I mean, there's a couple I'm not. I am. Oh, I don't have to memorize. Right. Let me look at it real quick. Here, up there. That one is right. That one is right. Yeah. That one's right. Yes. Look at you. All right. I'm going to do the hardest thing, which is to bring you all back to me for a little while. So, do you have your answers? Is this a highly competitive group who feels the need to be right? I can relate to you all then. All right. So anyway, so which one of these is level 2? D, we're going with D, and it is D. And so do you see there where that would be a struggling individual? What cues you into that person would be struggling in this area? Vague. Yeah, vague, superficial, right? So what's the next level then? B. That is B. So what has changed between those rubrics? Between those levels?
You're doing something.
Yeah, they are no longer vague or superficial, right? What's the next one?
C.
C. And then A. So, and you'll notice, what's the difference between level 4 and level 5?
Who's interacting? Yeah.
The students are interacting. So you remember on that scale where we talked about moving from kind of whole class to student focus? It doesn't get much more student focused than that, is it? Where you've intentionally set things up where the students are interacting with each other and you're simply facilitating those interactions in terms of what's going on there. In this one, who's doing a majority of the work? The students. And the more work the students have to do, the more they're cognitively engaged, if it's the right kind of work, and the more that they learn. Make sense? Excellent. All right. So we're kind of we're going to go into a transition pretty soon where we're going to start work time. Yay. But I want you, some of you printed this out, some of you can access it from your Dropbox. Either way is fine, the Dropbox links that was shared. But there is this Understanding Rubric Level Progressions Guide. What this does, you have the handbook, and the handbook's going to give you the rubrics. The Understanding Rubric Level Progressions Guide gives you a breakdown of what each level of the rubric actually means. It's the same thing the scorers use when they're looking to evaluate things. So what's nice about this is this can also be shared with teacher candidates with the same rules that apply to the handbooks. So you can give them this document. They can know exactly what it is. One of the things that we have liked about this assessment is we really felt like our final teacher licensure test, our students would get a study guide from the state, kind of a list of objectives. They would go in and take this test, and if they didn't pass, we had no idea how to help them because we had no idea what questions were asked. We didn't know what they answered. There was no way to facilitate learning. It was simply a test. This one, we actually have, well, first of all, it's a performance-based assessment, but we have the questions that are being asked. We have the answer key in the rubrics, and we really can get in a discussion about what's the performance, how are you doing, where do you see this, etc. That is very helpful. That actually makes completing the assessment a learning experience for our teacher candidates as well. One of the things our alums are telling us, and I think, I don't know when we're going to get this study done, but anyways, one of the things we're looking at right now is we use the Danielson framework is what most of our districts use for teacher evaluations in Illinois.
Well, the alignment between EdTPA and the Danielson framework is great. And what we're finding is our alums are telling us that having done EdTPA, their teacher performance evaluations are a piece of cake for them because they are used to providing evidence of practice. So what we came to realize is this was not only a summative assessment for us to use for our program, it was a formative assessment for their professional development in the future. And it has been powerful that way as we learn to use it more and more with that. So, one of the things I want to put here is the preponderance of evidence. So many times I'm asked, how do scorers score and what do they do? We operate on something called the preponderance of evidence, and this will actually be in the Understanding Rubric Level Progressions, the introduction. Preponderance of evidence means this. I don't go through secondary science portfolios and dock points for certain things. I actually look at the evidence provided, and I look at where that fits on the rubric. So, for example, for Rubric 1, I'm supposed to look at context for learning, the answer number 1 for their planning commentary, their lesson plans, and their instructional materials. So those are the 4 sources of evidence I use. I go through and I tag what evidence they've provided towards that rubric, and I go where it puts on the rubric. If most of the evidence is in level 3, guess what the score is on that rubric? A 3. If most of it's in a 4, guess where it's at? A 4. If most of it's in a 3 and I have 1 over to 5, guess where they're going to score? A 3, because that's the preponderance of evidence. Does that make sense? So it's where is most of the performance level at? It also doesn't matter if I as a scorer necessarily like the choices. So let's say they're teaching mitosis, because doesn't everyone want to teach mitosis? And they use a certain lab, and I'm like, ooh, you know what? I would not have used that lab. Guess what? That is not part of the rubric. And so as a scorer, I go strictly by the rubric in terms of what's being evaluated there. And if you ever go through official score train, which I highly recommend, some of the best professional development you can do if you're working with teacher candidates in this assessment, you go through some serious anti-bias training. And we'll get into a little bit of that in the next session, just about sources of bias that can come up. One of them is actually the choices made and not liking them. We have found with our faculty actually score harder, because they'll go through and they'll be like, that is not what we taught them to do. I'm like, yeah, so not in the rubric. So not in the rubric. So anyways, that's an interesting conversation sometimes, but with that. Okay, are you guys ready to get to work? Are you tired of me talking? I know my comedic routine has been pretty good, actually. The technology helped. All right. So here's task 1. We've got rubric 1, planning for content understandings. Rubric 2, planning to support varied student learning needs. Rubric 3, using knowledge of students to inform teaching and learning. These 2 rubrics go off of the same sources of evidence. They just look at them in different ways. Rubric 4, identifying and supporting language demands. Rubric 5, planning assessments to monitor and support learning. So those are the 5 rubrics. This is what you will need for task 1. You will need the content area handbook and the content area understanding rubric level progressions. And these things from your student teaching folder. I will show you where to get those in a moment for those of you who did not follow directions and get them ahead of time. And if you tell me, well, I didn't know if I was going to make it, that is not an excuse. I'm just teasing. We're going to be doing rubric 2. And so what you're going to do, and here's why I chose rubric 2. Rubric 2 is the same for every single handbook. So we can talk about the same things. You're going to be looking at different portfolios, because I wanted you to have portfolios in your content area, because that's where everybody tends to be happiest, right? So rubric 2 in your content area handbook, rubric 2 in understanding rubric level progressions. Using those materials, here are the questions. I've even given you, can I use this? Try not to do it. I've given you, for those of you who like to have notes and guide sheets and that type of thing, I've given you what's the guiding question, what are the primary sources of evidence, what's the automatic 1 criterion, we'll talk about that in a little while, and then what's the performance level at level 2, level 3, level 4, and what do you see in your candidate's work. If you didn't get one of these, I think Will has more back there.
I do. And also this, the link that she's referring to in the Dropbox is in the RSVP email. So if you need that, raise your hand and I can resend it to you.
for those of you who are just going to the Dropbox, you'll see January 22nd. Click on that, and then you should be able to find your content area. Well, let's say you're in art. Do I have any of my art people here? Oh, yay! So in art education, isn't it nice to get your own applause? I know. I'm here for you. Here's your handbook. Here's your understanding rubric level progressions. And here is your student teacher. Here's task 1. There's your stuff. And it works the same for all of you, just a different folder. Yes, correct.
I'll get Evans. Evans. I'm sure it's something I
Hey, Carolyn.
Yeah, we're in that front part. Yeah. Right. Yeah. We think we're in rubric 2. Right. Understand it. We even just the second having that. Right. Right. That's you probably should say this.
Well, for the ones that we're talking about.
Now I can't. Did I want my computer? All right.
Alright.
I always plan. That was iPad.
Oh, okay.
I always plan. What is mine? What are we supposed So we're just studying the layout.
Step 1, I've done it. The other one?
Oh, I thought you said, do I know what we're supposed
Maybe what's going on with the computer? Do you mind if I? What's going on?
She says I haven't gotten, it thinks I have to go up to RTS to get the thing.
Wayne and Daniel, I think I can do it too.
Alright, so the key material for this activity is that understanding rubric level progression guide. Having that out and being on rubric 2 in that guide.
Sure, I mean, that's what I need to do, is.
You're doing good, now you gotta fill out the
I mean, it's
stuff.
not gonna affect anything else on my computer.
Correct.
No.
It is, yes.
I am.
So are you ready?
What did you do? Well, that one is right there. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna pull out what the
Thank you.
performance level expectations are. Don't do verbatim. Because then what I'm gonna want you to do is go through and analyze the candidate's work.
Yeah.
basically.
You're gonna then show us the example.
Well, I gave you guys,
I never bring this here.
but not everybody brought their stuff, so.
It was in the Dropbox.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not everybody brought their. But you know what, I have my map of the colleges, you guys.
So do you have it tomorrow?
You know what, Will, I can give them my laptop.
I don't like it.
Yeah, I actually don't have to. This was the question about the.
Okay, now do you promise us
Will,
to
I
have
said,
my
track
laptop?
Oh, I can get mine out. Devin's got it. Devin's got it.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm
And then she had it.
the only thing I didn't do is
Like,
download
her
the
phone.
example. So, sample.
And you don't have to fill that out if you don't want to. That's just for people who want to know how to pull things together. Yes. No. Okay. So in that Dropbox, you will see an F15 SD. It's an elementary ed folder.
She got into that, she got into it.
Okay. Yes, but you pull it.
Okay, so we're doing task 1.
Student teacher folder.
There we go. Okay, so.
It's you.
So here you have rubrics.
So it's the
Yeah. Okay, so this is, yeah, what we have to talk about. This is rubric 2.
So this came from a student.
Yeah, that is correct. This is
Oh, I
a piece of
printed
student
it.
work.
Okay.
That is correct. And so, for this one, if you look at the
So
understanding
there's
rubric
rubric
level
2.
progression,
You'll notice you're gonna look at
context
context.
for
So we're
learning,
gonna look
planning,
at,
commentary, prompts 2 and 3.
so
Alright,
yeah, so
so,
this is.
by now you should know, what are you going to look at of the student teacher?
Okay.
What student teacher evidence are you looking at?
Are we supposed to apply?
Apply, yes. You're gonna look at the context for
Okay, so here's
learning
the evidence.
and planning commentaries 2 and 3.
And
And how do you know that?
So,
Under primary sources of evidence and the understanding rubric level progression. So look at your student teacher's work. Where is it at? That's actually the next slide, but you want to do that.
I was supposed to, and then I gave it to Greg. And Greg was sick. And then Greg got sick again, and then he gave it back to me.
We're gonna
I'm not kidding
take
you. We were
the
trying to
rest
do
and do.
I'm really, I feel better now.
I got this.
It's just okay, so this is the context for me. So what do they teach? I really don't like this. I felt like that much of them, describe any special features. There are no special features. It just seems perfunctory to me, but that's what it is.
Can we modify it or not?
No, what I did, because we always have them do is for student teaching, they do a context that's much more for the text. It's prose. It's in paragraph message. And so practically, I combined those two because I felt like this was not substantial. But we're looking to see planning to support varied student learning needs. So we need to find evidence where they are supporting varied student learning needs.
If we're looking at
So, is there any ability grouping or tracking? They can choose what they want. Honors. Okay, so that doesn't really. So this kind of thing. Yeah, the score is looking for evidence that the student is planning to support varied students. That they're planning instructional support according to requirement. But then it gives you different levels. And as a scorer, they want you to distinguish between the above 3 or below. And they explain what distinguishes it to the above and distinguishes it to the below. And once you've decided that, what makes it a 3, a 4, a 5.
This is just if you want to like summarize.
So it's pretty research.
And then we give them the summarizing
How you are taught to teach I did, yeah.
And some of my programs will support that fit.
I would never.
We haven't set up
this
that
to me is
if they have a like their video
Yeah, it was. And I would say what was most beneficial is it gave me a chance to actually experience more students.
But like my two fall candidates are
definitely.
Okay,
so they use a perspective, projector, I mean, I guess that's a very student learning. So I guess if I was, if I had some system, I'd write tag
versus that. So it just depends.
And then they have to kind of create this chart with how many students in this type of,
Yeah, so that's what a lot of some of my programs,
I mean, what I find interesting about this is, I mean, it's only students with IEPs or federal plans. And quite frankly, this is pretty easy for me to do because those IEP and federal plans use this language, and they use
they are normally doing other stuff, but then they're
again, I just don't feel like I have that.
That's coming back next Friday. They are going to be working with them. They're doing a review task 1. We're talking about tips for videotaping, etc. And they're going to be doing their actual teaching then.
And this is the one I think
and then they'll come back
where they in their own way, classify students. What I find interesting
and for us, that is
lack of executive function. That means
I don't know how I.
They don't say anything about it. And I don't know if that's appropriate to
Right. So like my 7 so like our biomed students, which of course I
no. I mean, I know that our students, I don't know if I haven't used that language. The year that we did this, it was in semester proposal.
all the different things that we
Should are still.
So but those timelines, those are the things that over the next year you can kind of play with.
We had them up.
Figure out. That's why piloting is great.
Natalie was in there, Kate Christie was in there. No, I don't think she was.
Yes.
So when they're documenting or classifying students, Is it appropriate for them to talk about what we call at-risk students who are at risk but not graduating from high school?
Yeah, they would do that under.
And it would be an okay classification.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's not where they're like, oh, we don't like that label. You know, it's really how they're looking at the students and what's going on. You know, that's
So where does that supports, accommodations, modifications for students who are here?
same thing here. Students with other learning needs. And learning need isn't necessarily a learning deficit.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So you know, gifted students can have learning needs that are not being met. But that's where they would put that in. They're overperformers.
Okay. Not having students.
No. We have a lot of students that don't have IEPs or 504s.
But you would talk about every student in terms of.
Oh, so we don't necessarily, no, so like let's say there's 27 kids, they're not gonna talk about every 20, but they may talk about, so like a group of struggling youth, that they definitely have students that are slower to read. So if they're doing something in class where students are supposed to be reading and answering questions, and they're giving them 10 minutes, they have to consider, how do I help that group that are slower readers? What do I do for them? So that way they can still finish in time with everyone else participating. Make sense? So it's that, even that type of differentiation. But they wouldn't have to say for all 27. Here's what I'm doing. We're not quite that differentiated.
Really spent time and studied it. I was able to compartmentalize it. For example, when we were doing different tasks, I just created a practice for the students. Here in the 5 rubrics, so they were having to go, okay, so rubric 8 and 3 and just want to feel like in reading practice because I do a lot of this. I always do analyzation and writing already. Like,
Yeah, you know too. Yeah, we just
I
think you should look at rubric 15 again. Read your answer, look at rubric 15, or how is this idea supported by the research? But we can say look at this one. So, right, we can't edit, we can't say, but we can. Right. Well, it wasn't necessarily that, it was our interpretation of how you're making. So that's what you kind of change. Oh, how are you doing? Yeah. Oh, you guys got this all here. Yeah, so you're going to be looking for, at number 2, you're going to be looking at
planning
commentary.
They have to describe
So if you look at that progression,
you know, see, I really enjoyed that because I know as a seminar instructor that I get.
So in this example, this came from the same.
But when they had to actually do
and this whole portfolio is and you'll be traveling with Sharon if you don't like the student teacher.
I was
They should send the context for learning.
they had a co-op that wasn't letting them start, but we wanted them to try.
It's captured.
And I like
within the student.
I love to teach it out. I love teaching them.
Context for learning is what they filled out about context. Okay, so task 1. If you go into the Dropbox with the task 1 portfolio, there are 5 things in there. One is the context for learning. That tells about the. There you go.
Robert Probst says that.
This tells about the setting. It tells about the setting. It's also going to identify what level.
You know,
So that'll be helpful.
I'm sorry, I just.
Oh, that's okay.
No, I didn't read it out loud.
Our students are when we did it.
Behind it. Okay, so here's standard B. There's standard B, no. Oh, no, I'm good. I got water. No, I'm great.
So they have to go through and kind of talk through what they're doing.
You don't want me any more caffeine.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, they don't do as much. They don't do as much description as much description as this, but I may have.
The GoPro.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I will say that as you continue on, some of the questions you feel like you say the same elementary and because if they say no more than 9 pages, and that tells us that we can't just text them. If you're going to have to, doesn't mean you have to have 9, it doesn't mean you have to have 5. It's not just
Okay, I already know.
and then how do you build on the just make connections? And so they have to do this
Figure out
All right, I'm going to pull you back for a moment just to talk about a few things. Sorry for the chaos at the beginning. I'm going to make sure everybody's where they're at with materials. They know what's going on, how to navigate. But this is good because we'll be doing this a lot, navigating through the system. So you'll kind of know where to head where I talk about things. Okay, so the guiding question for this particular rubric. What is the guiding question? And you don't have to say it verbatim, but really, what is the guiding question for rubric 2?
How do you support students according to their characteristics?
How do you support students according to their characteristics? Really, so this candidate's going to have to present an analysis of the student's characteristics and then talk about how they're supporting them, correct? All right, so what were the primary sources of evidence? Context for learning and the planning commentary, specifically which questions on the planning commentary? 2 and 3, exactly. So when I, as a scorer, look at this particular rubric, I look at the context for learning, planning commentary questions 2 and 3, and you'll notice it said that I could look at the lesson plans and instructional materials for clarification, right? So I didn't make you pull this up. Are you starting to see how the Understanding Rubric Level Progressions Guide is useful? It's going to tell you exactly what things they're looking at. Characteristics of a Level 3 performance, this is what the rubric says. It says plan supports are tied to learning objectives and the central focus with attention to the characteristics of the class as a whole. When you go into level, did you find level 3 in the Understanding Rubric Level Progressions? I'm just going to say URLP from now on. Will that be okay? I know, because you need another acronym, right? So in the URLP, can somebody give me some way that the URLP clarifies that a little bit? What are some things that it brings a little more attention to? That level 3 of rubric 2 in the URLP. Ooh, if someone just walked in right now, they'd be like, oh, I don't know what they're talking about in there, but. Did you say neither do we? That's hilarious. Or I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, did you have one?
No, I really.
No? Are you sure? You just panicked. I saw it.
No.
Where's the time that what you got in the screen?
Oh, okay, so this is what's going to be, okay, so this is why you've got the URLP, right, that guide behind, and you have the EdTPA handbook. Guess which one this one comes from? EdTPA handbook. So the EdTPA handbook, you're going to see the regular rubric, and in the guide, you see the actual breakdown of the rubric. Oh. Yes. All right, so the handbook is designed for the candidates to know what the rubrics are like and give them all the details. The URLP is designed for the scorer and evaluators to know what each of these means and give clarification. You can use both. There's what? Every hour? Oh! Does that make sense? Oh! Return from lunch.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And somebody
multiple things that I learned on a campus. All right. So does anybody have URLP level 3 up in front of them? Okay, I see it right there. Can you tell me something from that characteristic? All right, so I lost them. Characteristics is a level 3.
Sticky apps.
Plan instructional supports are aligned to learning objectives.
Thank you, my science people came through for me.
Welcome.
I appreciate that. If you take a look here, they're related to learning objectives and the central focus. That has to be, that is something that you can either see in the materials or that the candidate has specifically written about. There are certain rubrics where it actually requires the candidate to write about it itself. By the way, there was an automatic 1. Did you guys catch the automatic 1? What's the automatic 1? They do not address them. Now, if they don't have any IEPs or 504s, it's okay. They will not receive an automatic 1 for not having IEPs or 504s. But if they have identified IEPs and 504s, in what document? Context for learning. Look at you all speaking at TPA. Well done. If they've identified them in the context for learning, there are certain rubrics where they have to address them. Even if it's as simple as saying, no accommodations needed for this. Because there are situations where students don't need accommodations, and to actually give them accommodations would actually hamper their growth. But they need to say they don't need accommodations for this particular thing. That happens a lot on the rubric 5, the assessment rubric. If they're not giving a test during their learning segment, which they don't have to do a formal assessment, then they don't, if they have students whose only accommodations are extra time on a test, they don't have to accommodate them, but they need to say no accommodations needed because there are no tests needed. Make sense? Yeah.
Would you recommend that students pick a class where there are, that student teachers pick a class where there are students with 504s or IEPs so that they can address this fully?
It won't affect them score-wise. I always recommend that they pick a class where there are varying levels of student performance.
Because that'll be easier to write something.
You have more to write about. Exactly. It's actually really hard sometimes to do at TPA and an AP course. Any ideas why?
Restricted range.
Restricted range. Oh, I like that phrase. Can I use that? Nicely done. Restricted range. Exactly. If you have a restricted range, it's harder to do it. In terms of the writing. Makes sense? Okay. Let's take a look at this rubric. What differentiates a level 3 from a level 4?
Individuals.
Yeah, we're addressing needs of individuals. If you go to look in the rubric level progressions, it's going to tell you specifically it cannot just be one individual to move them to a 4. It needs to be a consistent pattern of identifying groups or individuals because of that concept, preponderance of evidence. Does that make sense? So if I'm a scorer and I say, okay, most of their supports are for the whole class, but I've got this one individual they provided supports for, what's going to happen though? They're going to stay at a 3. Okay? What gets them to a level 5?
You have to meet level 4 and also identify common development approximations.
Yeah, they're going to look at preconceptions, common errors, and misunderstandings, and how are they going to deal with that? I know, I really needed to bring like trophies or something, right? With that, so do you see the progression there as we're going through? This is actually the math one, but you'll notice it's pretty common language throughout all of your handbooks. Rubric 2 is very similar. Have you had a chance to look at your teacher candidates' materials? Okay, here's what we're going to do. For about the next 15 minutes, 20 minutes, because I'm giving you a break in there as well. It is a combo break work session type thing where wander, meander, come back, look at your teacher candidate stuff. Based on the primary sources of evidence, what documents are you going to look at? Context for learning. Planning commentary, and you're looking at answers 2 and 3. Are we good with that?
Yeah, I even brought the scores they got. So for those of you who want to guesstimate where you think they're at, I'll tell you. I know some of you are like, yeah, I really want to know. So we've got about 20 minutes. I have no idea what time it is right now. It's 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock whistle, remember?
Oh, now you're right. 1:25. I'm going to bring you back to discuss your findings. Okay?
Actually, that's better because what you want is you want the lesson 6 and activity. You want all like kind of you don't want the reasoning or rationality on the left. So really, their lesson plan should have their objectives, the related family objectives, kind of an activity guide for the day, activities, what they're doing to assess. Because as a scorer, we have like elements of a score, and do you think that there should be if you want it to be, if you want it to be the common core standard, it's not part of the rubric. So, ahead of time what you're submitting. That's RLS. Like when you pre-art, then it goes. That's what you have to do. Are you not sure what it is? Like, you know what I mean? All right. I tried. Oh, yes. The table was getting supervised. Sorry, I'm just there's more. How much?
Oh, no, you're allowed to read it. Yeah, and the feedback, there's actually a specific guide to what kind of feedback you can give. But overall, you can give, up until they're working on like your portfolio during student teaching, so if you're doing craft one, I mean, whatever feedback you want. You can crash it out, you can But with student teaching, so let's say, for example, you have a you forgot to mention. So instead of saying you forgot to add research here, you would put what research you just put in name the question. You're not it's a prompt. It's a guiding question. And we have a lot of time. We do. I mean, I do. You may like, sometimes I highlight something and I say like, does this data represent the performance for the whole class?
I don't know exactly how it's going.
So we're tuning in. Oh, or I'll tell you that maybe you want to look at rubric 11 again. Read your answer and then do it. No.
Do something. I mean, that's my point. I have right chart, but I have on list the academic language that they have to allow. I just have a learning coach. I don't like having a lot of boxes on it. I just like it. But yeah, I mean, we did an activity with academic language. I want you to think about something else.
Yeah, originally the Ed TPA stood for educative teacher performance, and now it's not activity. The assessment, but then I've been hard measuring. The final change was with guidance and reflect and grow.
It's really a really good exercise to mentor somebody and not in the area that you teach them.
But ours, we spent the last 2 years embedding
She even activities. I have no idea what she wants to do.
So by the time,
Just teaching.
in some of our programs they've done SGPA like portfolio and intermediate specialists. So they usually are students. The usual model is they have a major clinical experience right before they student teach, and in that clinical experience, they made that clinical experience in SGPA like
Got the highest rated.
and that's where the instructor then can get lots of direct feedback.
Anyway. in terms of I think you really need to get out of your content to truly understand what everyone is.
And demonstration, because, not only are they doing it, they see
And even in your, even when you have good intention, you just don't think exactly that is how you're thinking in a way. And using like similar language, like have good intention. It does talk about support, instructional support. That was big for some of our students in faculty because they never used the term instructional support before. And so just that learning, being able to integrate that into preparatory experiences where when they get to it, everybody's using the same language. It's actually enabled our programs to really talk to each other in ways they couldn't before. Like I'm using in my math, we both talk about academic language. The glossary already plays the glossary. Yeah, it has a lot of those. Yeah, and faculty and supervisors work with TPA need to go through stuff like this so they learn so they understand the performance expectation of the language. So even a lot of our supervisors, our LED program has scaffolded their observation questioning to where every time they go in, it's a different set of questions that use TPA language and build on each other. So they have the kids talking it the first 8 weeks as they're doing their stuff. And it really comes together nice. And again, that's stuff I can share. I mean, in terms of what do you mean? It's actually as they go and observe. So my supervisors go and observe their student teacher, and each observation they're looking at something different. Oh yeah, no, it's very student teaching. It's our supervisors right now.
It's the benefit of when the district went back to the reasoning. Because I noticed a concern is the language, especially with that series, is now
To get to know how the rubrics, what that looks like when you actually have teacher candidate material. What does a portfolio actually look like? What do they write about? And how do you interpret their writing in conjunction with the rubric? So it's an application that I saw, like, we're not actually doing. No, but you need to know. You need to know performance expectations. You know, you go in and read something, right here, really missing that. And the only way to really do that, so for example, many questions my supervisors get are legitimate. Just from knowing, for task 1, this is what they create. For task 2, the only way to really get that is to look at new paradigms.
could only have
And do it. I need to help them understand. Yeah, that's one of my students. That's why they're all coded. It's just because I pull them from our files. And yeah, it was really useful for me to spend about 6 hours just. Oh, you're fine. It is rubric 2. High school is it's task 1. It is task 1. They also No. We are still on the same one. And then the new 21st century, that is what it's about. It's not about content. It's about skills and working together and being able to apply skills and exactly. Yeah. And I think it's going to be really helpful for me. Identify key habits for natural skills so that we can teach it to
like how they scored on there.
and if you have to an assessment, everybody takes an assessment. It's teaching in class. And it was interesting, just in our and that's where we're at.
So I'm wondering later if you become a sport,
And Katie Nara and the other chapter in our I don't think I don't think they're not willing to change, but that's just how they see their job. Oh, gosh, it's the best thing.
like to ask one only one person looking at your especially if you so each portfolio takes the score about 8 hours.
Are they good things?
It is still only goes to one.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Oh, no, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's dumb. I mean, it's dumb. Like, Carly Robinson teaches Lenise in this really straight class. She doesn't. She just, she just kind of wants it. I'm like, go talk to her. Be the adult. Take your hand and put it out and say, or, she has 0. Yeah, well, she hasn't turned this. Have you ever asked her about it? Have you ever thought to say, wait, and do your current event that had 15 stipulations that I gave you? I mean, even something as general as a current event, she's got all these requirements. It has to be about this type of article. I mean, everything's on her terms. But I think that's a norm. That's part of the old literary tradition. And I think sometimes we just have to let teachers know, what?
Right. One of my questions being
moving on from that tradition. You have to.
A lot of CT.
And you're going to like teaching. I mean, I have to be honest with you. I love teaching at the state level. And I think it's because I am at peace with not giving these hard tests. I mean, I'm at peace with how I'm teaching them. Because I finally just, if they don't like what I'm doing, then I don't want to do it another way. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not open to things, but I don't feel badly that I don't give them that we spend 5 days working on a research paper. I don't rush them. I'm just so much more at peace about it. Yeah, I would have a lot to say about that.
I actually think this might be not an easy
Well, yeah. I mean, we could talk about it, but I think, it's not about. I think I probably give more grades more easy grades. I mean, I know it, but it's mastery. I mean, they have to do it. It's not they get a C in planning and then they can go see the teacher. I mean, exactly. I mean, I would love to match him with feedback and show him the feedback that he's doing compared to, stocks or, and that they've got this normal piece to look at. I'm like, well, if that's for you, then there's a problem right now because we don't have the same norm as you do. So, well, have a good weekend, girl. Thanks for talking to me.
I will look forward to
all that.
It'll always be there.
As many of them do.
And that is also educated now. We have students who happen today so like they could feel about they could so I'm looking to the candidates they can't
Can they do
So I wonder what like Jeff Doe is doing. Jeff Doe got that job How are you getting this They all go after my class now. I will take a ride I will in a little while. Well, that's the nice thing about like you when you're credit is out, which one to get back
All right, if you haven't taken a break, I would highly recommend doing so now before there we go.
They have to, right, and so, but then they got laptops, but like, it was a Liz Brown Center, but I was and Eric Schwarzenegger said, oh my God, so she was gonna go back and double check that she could take that to the grade laptop. These are Christy's girls. They just came up in our seminar together. It sounds like they have them, like they've got computers. Well, that's good. Yeah. They know, like, we cannot give out our Wi-Fi password. They must have used their computers. So, like, teachers, I would get a teacher. It's not great for planning. These guys are like, let's swap on our iPad. Because they can't use their own equipment in there.
All right, I'm going to call you all back, please, to talk about some logistical things. I want to go through some things that you'll all find as you kind of start to explore EdTPA and such. One of the reasons that we had you actually look at a portfolio in conjunction with the rubrics is because one of the things your teacher candidates are going to struggle with is, what do I actually have to create? And it's really important that if you're a supervisor or if you're an instructor, whatever role you play in preparing them or supporting them, that you actually understand what they have to create and where they find performance expectations and what they do. So, for example, and I probably should have done this at the first part, so I'm really sorry. If you look under that portfolio, all of you have 3 tasks, correct? Under task 1, how many things do they have to create? 5. They have to create 5, exactly. So you've got that context for learning, the assessments, instructional materials, lesson plans, and planning commentary. So you just spent some time working through a rubric that basically had you look at the context for learning and 2 very specific prompts in the planning commentary. Okay? As we were going through that. By the way, all of those, I just looked at my little answer sheet, all of those were officially scored portfolios. They're all portfolios created by ISU students. For all of them, for rubric 2, they scored a 3. So that will kind of give you a little bit of a barometer of what that acceptable level of performance looks like for rubric 2. Does that make sense? Are we starting to get a feel for the role of the understanding rubric level progressions? how that kind of breaks things down. I saw some of you circling things and making notes, and we wanted to give you a feel of not what those look like in the abstract, but a concrete example of what was going on. What I would kind of like to do, we were also going to look at rubric 3, but we're running a little short on time. So what I would like to do is actually skip to task 2. Are we okay with that? Okay. So we're going to skip to task 2. By the way, I do apologize that rubric 2 and task 2 were confusing to people. Task 1 is the first 5 rubrics, which means that task 2 is
6 through 10.
6 through 10, exactly, the second 5 rubrics. We're going to look at rubric 6. Can anybody find that in their URLP and tell me what the basic label on that rubric is?
How does the candidate demonstrate positive learning environment?
Yeah, positive learning environment. Can you look at a level 3 in that rubric and tell me characteristics at a level 3? It's the same for everyone, which is again why we're doing it. Respect.
Also by name.
Engage. Rapport. It's mutual respect, mutual rapport in terms of that. And so that's the characteristics for that acceptable level. And that's where we talk about why would the context for learning be important when you're looking at that. Culture, school culture. And so what you're going to see is students talking about in their response what we would look at. So if you look at rubric 6, and I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. Well, I'm going to leave this up. Rubric 6, what are the primary sources of evidence for rubric 6?
Video clips.
Video clips.
Instruction commentary.
The instruction commentary, which prompt?
2.
Prompt 2. So what you're going to do is you're going to read prompt 2. You might have a hard time watching the video clips because of the environment we're in right now if you didn't bring headphones. So look at prompt 2 and look at the rubric that goes with it and see what they talked about. Normally when we're scoring, we look at what they write and then we also look at the video clips. Sometimes there's stuff in the video clips that students don't mention. For this particular rubric, they can still get credit for that. So I'll tag things in the video that aren't talked about in the prompt, and that's okay. They can still get credit for them in terms of where they fit on the rubric. All right? So we're going to do the same thing for rubric 6 that we did for rubric 2, but perhaps with a little less confusion of where to find things. So for those of you who are working electronically, you're going to look under task 2, and you're going to have instruction commentary. For those of you who printed things out, you want to be in your instruction commentary, and then also have your URLP out. I'll come around to tables to see where you're at and what you need from me. Okay? I'll give you about 15 minutes to go through that. Yes.
Two questions that came to me, but I want to direct them to you so you can get them out. The one is, does the teaching segment that they choose to put forward need to be necessarily large, or could it be something smaller?
Depends on the handbook.
Okay.
So, and they'll, within the handbook, like for early childhood, the early childhood handbook, they have one has to be whole class, one can be small group.
Okay.
So it depends on the handbook.
All right, so that's the
Yeah.
handbook.
And in general, it should be.
Elementary?
I don't know in elementary. I'd have to look at the handbook, which we can look real quick. If you have the
Okay,
handbook.
so that's where that question came from. Is to be a score, do they need to be a U.S. citizen? To go
I
through
don't
scoring?
think so. I've never been asked that question before. I don't think so. No, it's not a qualification. No. Oh yeah, no, you wouldn't have to be a.
This is really a video, but the commentary goes with the video.
She said handbook is in order to class for teams to read first, handbook for the
In the end, submit so this is where it fits in. And then this one that's already is like a 15-minute drill. Oh, they really want to. It's like where you're gonna be. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, no, it's good for education.
But you have to watch it several times. Okay.
And then even if they're not necessarily teaching, just what their lines.
And this is a video I watched.
It doesn't matter which one.
They will have you demonstrate the respect. So they have to point out where in the video.
I mean, I think I'll watch it at home. If you go in the front, he's unique. If you go in the
What was the other question you asked, Betty?
This is what the students say. Right. And this is how you evaluate. And this is the actual. I'm just not. This is the practice. This is the thing that she did, right? Based on each instruction. And then we have to. Right. And then the first time we're seeing the student. I never. This is how you grade it. But it makes sense. Right. And they also see at the beginning, right?
Well, that's supposed to come out. Each one lines. Yes, and this is in the handbook.
Okay, so for least performance rather than a whole class.
You're looking at the scores, the exam constitutes the whole class credit.
So it's already based
Back to basic. Page 8 of the handbook clarifies that situation.
selective class.
Oh, sure.
No, we're talking about.
Yeah, back to teacher. You're on the wrong tab. And then go to page 8. Back to 10. So you're in tab 2. Oh, yeah, okay, so no. She's dealing with the question. Oh, no, never mind. Stay in tab 2.
Keep your stickies in the same. Alina's answering the question that Sarah.
Do you want
someone
stickies?
posed, can it be a small group task, or does it need to be a whole? Yeah, and it's handbook specific, so the answer is on page 8.
Page 8.
Start it, memorize it. Page 8 answer for us.
Okay, so on page 8 it says, if your placement for elementary literacy has you responsible for a group rather than a whole class, plan should describe instruction for that group, minimum of 4 students. That group will constitute the whole class for EdTPA. So they would do the whole portfolio around that group.
So they could do just a small group.
Yes, instruction they're responsible. Here's the thing that I recommend. They shouldn't pull out a group specifically for EdTPA.
But if a group is created.
If a group is created that is part of their instructional load, they could use that group as their EdTPA group.
If there were timing of things have to be done, what they want a small group might be what our students are
Working with,
accessible to.
Yeah, you find only on literacy, you only have to do
There's no more names in there. I would say
You could do it as literacy and social
we're choosing to satisfy the state rate we want to put. So I would say we use some different. You and I might use some different. They're not ever going to switch.
I don't know if they'll ever switch, but they're both charged.
Well, they do.
As the state decided that we could choose one of them, just have to and we could choose the performance.
Yes.
And committees and they put together.
You can actually do literacy strategy looking at how. So like our students when they have to take the class in the
Well, only if they went to special school.
they have to take most places now.
Right. Personality kit.
And they don't necessarily have to.
So the other thing is,
Because states around the world, there are
turning out. I don't know. She's Dr. Bean. I am not working with her.
well, no. Then you have an answer.
okay, that's kind of what. Like, yeah, there's a pretty round you had.
You had like a certain number of teachers like coming in every year. And same year you're doing hard. And so you were doing your teachers evaluation at the same time. That was part of your I left before we had to start putting all the writing in place. That was like your evaluation, so I only got it. And so the person would print it all out, and would come and sit in, and he would feel like, was I in your classroom? He'd come out from the meeting, then he'd go look at the calendar to make sure we were in school on that day. But he was in our classroom a lot. I was too, every day I was in the classroom. He felt like we didn't have to be so formal about it, but then he'd make sure that we put everything in time, and that was I just formally evaluated because I was literally, it was hard to make it now. I can't figure it out. We had to have a meeting here with a carry binder. Okay. Because when he was in like plans for it, he didn't talk to them. So you have to get with them and go. So I've been down 9:30. This is really
And it was amazing. And just with the second place guiding, this showing how they like she was very content. I just sit way in the back here like, I think it was I never read the grading section. Maybe it was I what do I need to
For me, it's level 5.
I literally in the last year how many seniors I put that into application? Okay.
Instead of saying task 1, task 2, task 3, is there a more general?
Planning, construction, assessment.
Figured there was. I'm like, how the hell we did? Planning,
Instruction, assessment.
Because we run 3 methods classes. And so with 3 methods classes, before we student teach, exactly, we stick all the planning into method 1, all the assessment into methods 2, or all the assessment into methods 3, and all the instruction into methods 2. Planning, instruction, assessment.
Yeah, and you may want to reverse the instruction and assessment, and here's my theory.
So it's an assessment first?
Assessment first, because when I do this, they plan, and then they teach, and that's where they collect their evidence, and it doesn't matter if they get like for test 3. And what we find is many times test 3 is harder for them, and we don't start at a time on assessment, so working assessment earlier in the program can really start to
Planning, instruction, assessment.
Yes. But those are the 3 methods.
Okay. So then we'll get moving to assessment all the way up to the front. So our instructor our instructor might not.
Yes, I would say, do your planning and then your assessment where they can actually look at student learning, analyze student learning, feedback,
Right.
or you can leave it in the order that it is.
Because the order is planning, assessment. So assessment's third.
Assessment's third, but really 2 and 3 could go either way.
Right.
Because they have other ones during.
And they get more teaching opportunities as the third one anyway.
Well, there you go, so that would make sense for you.
Right.
And then the third one, you can also work in the hand.
Right.
Yeah.
I like that.
Just like today, we submitted their definition for all of us. I think it would be nice for us to have that for all of our students.
Are we doing a tiered adoption or are we going straight to 41? Are we doing a tiered adoption or are we going straight to 41? Are we going to start off in the spring of 18, 36 is okay? Or are we starting off in the spring of 18, we got to go straight to 41? Straight to 41, there's no...
Whenever we go through this, it's 20% out of 40. And you can start, as far as I'm concerned, this spring. If you
Won't matter to us if we start in the spring as well. Right, that's how we format it, won't matter.
If you come in the way that you're in,
Right.
from a level 3 to a level 4 in rubric 6? Well, we've got rapport with and respect for, so here we've got that about the same. What's the difference between level 3 and level 4? It's a more challenging learning environment. So in other words, and it's not more challenging because it's hard to hear the instructor, by the way. It's that the academic activities being presented are challenging for the learners, that they're having to think. That's part of that learning environment. And then you'll notice what happens in level 5. Different perspectives and promotes mutual respect. I think it's very important that if students are showing different perspectives that you have that mutual respect part, right? Otherwise you just have chaos. But you really see an increase of the facilitation of learning in the learning environment in the rubric. As you took a look, most of your portfolios, the candidate there was a level 3 for the rubric. It's our highest scoring rubric is learning environment at ISU. There was actually one that was a level 4. Where's the math? That was a level 4 candidate for that particular one. So, and because they had the more challenging learning opportunities for the students with that. So, again, I want to kind of take you through that structure of that task. Isn't it always the way it is? You kind of have everything laid out how you think it's going to go, and then you're like, yeah, we're throwing this out. So I'm skipping around in the PowerPoint. If you take a look, what are the things they have to create for task 2?
Commentary and a video.
Commentary and a video. Now, the video thing is very important because depending on your handbook, depends on how many video clips. Some of you, it's one video only. Some of you, they have to have 2 video clips. Some of you, they can have 1 or 2 video clips. So this is where we start to see some differentiation in the expectations just from the handbooks themselves. One of the things I can tell you is this. No matter what number of videos your particular handbook calls for, those videos from start to finish have to be continuous, which means no interruption in time, and they have to be unedited. The only editing that's allowed is the blurring of faces. So if you capture a student's face on video and you didn't have video permission for that, you can blur their face. The other thing is sometimes subtitles if it's hard to hear what the student was saying. So if you have a video and the audio is not great, the candidate has 3 options. And we'll talk about this again, but the candidate has 3 options. One is to provide a transcript of what was said for certain parts of the video. One is to provide subtitles within the video, and one is to write about it in key places in the commentary where they're using that video piece as evidence. All 3 of those are perfectly acceptable, and there's not an advantage over either one. It's just, they just need to know that. Yes, sir?
I just want to jump in and say something quick so people aren't panicked. The video component of the technology in the classroom course is being slightly redesigned so that our students will have slightly more expertise, I think, with video production and creation and all of that jazz. So I don't want folks to be panicked thinking, oh God, now I also have to learn about video too. Yeah. We'll have supports available for that.
Most of my instructors and supervisors know very little about video. I can talk megabytes more than I ever wanted to be able to. But that's because I'm normally the one who gets the calls. You know, I have 900 student teachers who have my email address. If there's a problem, yes. So, and they actually think I'm brilliant with technology. What they don't know is on the other end of the phone, I'm Googling. How do we change this to this? And I'm like, all you have to do is this. I'm like, oh, thank you. Hey, no problem. But anyways, you know, I was having an interesting conversation with one of my Psi guys, and they were talking about kind of some of the linear preparations and such. And one of the things I realized I didn't say that you probably need to know is when you look at EdTPA, we've said there are how many tasks? 3, right? There are actually 4 parts to EdTPA, and I want to talk to you real quickly about that. So there's the planning of the EdTPA, and then there's the actual teaching of the learning segment. And during that teaching is when they collect all of their evidence for task 2 and task 3.
So task 2 and task 3, instruction and assessment, get written up after the fact. They're looking back on what happened. One of the reasons that's important to understand is as you go about structuring your semester in student teaching, laying out for students when they're going to do what, it's important to remember that they need to leave enough time to plan. They have that teaching time. They have enough time to write up tasks 2 and 3. It's also important to remember that tasks 2 and 3 can be written up in either order. So just because they're labeled task 2 and task 3 does not mean you have to write task 2 first and then task 3, because you collect the evidence at the same time during that teaching. So once they're done teaching their learning segment, they will have the evidence for both task 2 and task 3. The reason I say this is, for us at least, assessment has been our weakest performing task. Some of my programs have flipped the order in which the students write it up, and we're waiting to see those results to see if it makes a difference. I don't have enough to say quantitatively yet in terms of that. So just know that. The other reason I say that is because when they're doing their planning, they really need to know what's in task 2 and task 3. Why?
Yeah, well, that's because it's what they're planning.
That's what they're planning for. So you can't send them into task 1 without looking at the task 2 and 3 rubrics in terms of that. Knowing what they'll have to engage students in, and that's one of the reasons why when I come back in February, half of you may not show up, but when I come, I'm just teasing. When I come back in February, we're going to be exploring those other rubrics that are different for each content area more in depth in terms of what's going on there. So that's where we are there. They've got the video clips. If you're like, well, which video clips, how many video clips do my students need? You can look in the overview of your handbook. You can look at the evidence chart of your handbook, which is usually around page 40 of the handbook, to take a look at how many video clips, what are the options for students there, etc., in terms of going with that. All right, how do we feel about rubric 6? We're okay? All right. I noticed we had a much easier time finding, when your presenter gets her act together, it's really much easier to find the materials, right? We'll just blame it all on me. All right. Yes?
One question though, and maybe I'm wrong here, but rubric 6 is still about learning environment, right?
It is about learning environment, yes.
Well, then shouldn't it be on task 1?
No, because this is instruction. We're using the videos as evidence to the learning environment you created.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Context.
Yes. Correct. We planned for it. Now, how did we actually execute? That's what task 2 is all about, execution in terms of what's going on there. Okay, so we're going to go to task 3. What's the focus of task 3? Assessment. This one, boy, there's your different areas are going to look very different depending on the choices students made. So that'll be interesting. So my art student, you'll notice they did a basic one. You'll notice they have the assessment commentary, evaluation criteria. That's what they used to look at their assessment, to evaluate student mastery towards the objectives. And then they have student work samples, 1, 2, and 3. They've got their 3 focus students. Some of you will have more files because when you see this, it means the feedback is on the student work samples. Some of you, when you go in, the feedback is in a separate document. And so we are going to be looking at rubric. I go through here real quick. Look at all the work we're skipping. Boy, if you were my high school students, you'd be cheering right now. Here's task 3. Rubric 11 is analysis of student learning. Rubric 12, providing feedback. Rubric 13, student user feedback. And you can read, so I won't go through the rest of those. Here's the materials you need. That should say task 3, teacher candidate materials, content area, etc. We're going to look at rubric 12. So for rubric 12, you're going to go to our favorite guide, the URLP. Look at the primary sources of evidence. They should be an assessment commentary prompt. I think it's prompt 2. And then it should be the student work samples with the feedback. And same routine, we're going to go through and start looking at what does the rubric call for and how does this candidate do? So page.
So in other areas, music arts, that's something that would be great. So one thing should be in which section?
I didn't like the
Okay, so
this is what the student wrote. This is what the student.
well, this is right here.
Okay, those are the things that go with the writing.
Maybe K-12 like that, I don't, for example. No, it's right in the website. But again, it's a description.
But they did do it with like a social studies unit. I mean, that was the issue thing that like, but it would have to.
Like she's made available to us at trades or
Actually, download science, and that's what I was being, so it's really interesting. But which is kind of exciting that we can tell from, yeah.
Oh, no, that's okay. It's what I One's great, and what we do have is they actually don't have not the student teaching, but none of us know. So I can offer that up to you. And me and Austin, is their value. Basically, that's one thing. No idea. Yeah, so the way men student teaching will be like their international students are looking for Des Moines and West yeah, there are issues also see around 15-minute tracks. So it might be something that we need to go
And that's why I like it when
unnecessary busy work. It's just to describe it. Very interesting. Yeah.
And show us what you actually are.
I'm hoping that our
but I did take some training.
And also get things moving because they are training. And I try to speak it. I don't know. The thing I would say, hey, you're a teacher, and then that'll get that moving in through the circle. Okay, so Connie Starr, and then other ladies. Yeah, I think I have my ducks in a row. I may come back to you with more questions if it doesn't. Let's do like something like this. It's just a letter of interest, but it's working with China. More people is more people. Yeah.
Really helpful. Like, I don't know why. Together. I just got that, like, when you said that about they used to be 12. So I explained that to this really stupid to them. So like, we're standard A, like, I was worried about standard A. No, so I finally was correct. Like, this is why literacy I think it's easier to touch there. I think it's easier. And we have to go with well, that's and then you know they do questions habits that they that's where they yeah, right. I mean, they are familiar with another pump, even though they have another pump, recommend and they didn't know what I their students teachers need to know this early on. That's why she stayed with a woman, and now we were running that fire. Yeah. So they're going to go early, and I was going in like being very intentional. Anyway, I know there's more info. I did it for assistant supervisors here. By the time I get to that, sure, yeah, I know. And that's why it's private and that's and I might look at it and then go back and look during the line of I had a really fun semester we did it. They did it together. They earned a t-shirt. Yeah, it was big. They wanted to, can we act like it's snowing? Can like we throw some, some snow? They were fun. They had a good attitude. Good. So, actually, there's students on now, but I'm never really sure. Like, something
No. Two, yeah.
Yeah, he read along and then go.
So you chose this.
Okay, so I'm just totally changing the subject, Nancy, but I just got this email.
You know, Wednesday, Boston, Tuesday.
Well, I've never had anyone that I mean, it actually went really well. They're in the bus drive. And I really need to hear it. And you know, it's not that way. Okay, here's when I'm coming to the interview.
Well, so,
If I have time, I'm going to know the building. They can try to here. And then we have another thing.
so since I
Or whatever. And
and
the
the
other
other
thing,
thing,
email that to you. That when I get your email, it's basically
so you major.
I don't want to have to worry about it.
So they found out that she was, and now they attached that
Yes, I have that on. And she teaches.
we did this right.
Otherwise, it's your You're not going to.
It's just,
Your field.
it's just so sad.
I now have provided one I mean, here's what not to say. Here's how you would say it.
Good.
I didn't go quite that far. I did, because I got tired of it. I got tired of them not getting that.
But this
Every week. But you just talk about it the moment I heard it. Right, so I finally had to, I finally understood the wrong way, right way. That was my example.
generally doesn't do that pretty well. I mean, that's something that I've always been impressed with. And I had that file. And we were in the middle of an earthquake on Guam. And he's like, Amy, come here. You're gonna go stand. Yeah, I mean, you're exactly where you should stand. Yeah, yeah. But you know, it's a couple of well, and this is the first time they've ever vaccinated a school that quickly.
I think that was so cute. I knew because of it. I have too many drivers.
I know. Well, of course, yeah, right. And then of course they couldn't be outside, and of course it was such a nice story that the university was right there to help out. And then, it just breaks my heart that apparently we had
It was an accident.
yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I think we're still just looking at this river.
Wow, now read all weekend. I've attended all 3 workshops.
There you go. We could come up with a really cool little
on the journey, on the road.
I pulled out a I have no light. I use them
Oh, no, that was done by the higher state. After a year of
I know, I use like those big pens that are like paper, because you have to,
When is your, are you fully in test?
That's clear.
Yes.
yes. We might be like that. Because she said in the beginning of student teaching, they're hearing up language while they're working on it, and I forgot.
Yes, you talked about stanza questions.
Well, I don't know. No, that's something I can share.
Yeah, that's something I think I can share.
I have Nancy.
We get done at 2:30, right? Our LA advisors. Yes,
Thank you. We'll see you in February. Oh yeah, I'm English education.
Oh, excellent. Do you want to know what your rubric 12 was in there? It was a 3.
Oh, see, I would have given it a 2. Okay, well, that's good.
I'm glad to know when I'm bored.
Maybe it was a generous 3?
I mean, that's
Well, we'll be
kind of
talking more,
that's
yeah.
a big decision.
Right.
Above or below.
All right, I'm going to call you back one last time for stuff. Couple of things. If you take a look here, this rubric is really interesting. Okay, I know I use the word really, and some of you might think I exaggerate a little bit. If you take a look at the nuances between it, you'll notice from a level 2 to a level 3, what we have is feedback is general or feedback is specific. But either way, feedback has to be related to the learning objectives, and it can either address strengths or needs. Does that make sense in terms of that? Notice when we get to level 4, now it has to address both strengths and needs. Guess what the number one reason students score a 3 is? What are they most likely to give feedback on? Needs. Because they mark stuff, right? You'll notice they'll say things like good job. Is good job specific to learning objectives? No. And so if they're going to say, I'm woohoo! So, really working with students to say, if you're going to say something that they wrote this answer, you need to tell them why it's a good job. So they repeat that later on. They know why that was a strength coming out of there, etc. So that's what's kind of neat about Rubric 12, is it really provides a very great teaching tool of how to walk teacher candidates through feedback and how to give feedback and what is effective feedback. And marking something wrong is not good feedback, nor is saying good job, because a student may feel good about themselves, but they don't know why, right? A sticker is not feedback. I know, some of you are like, it's a reward. It doesn't tell the students what was good about the performance. By the way, does anybody have a chance to look at the student work samples in conjunction with the rubric? Any content areas want to know what the score was? For rubric 12, they're all different, so you have to tell me what content area.
World language.
World languages was a 4. Oh, look, you guys are calibrating. Nicely done. Any other content? Art was a 2.
Yes.
Oh, good. So you can see the logic in it. Excellent. Elementary was a 2.
Yeah, we got it.
I know. Woo! So, any other ones want to know? All right.
that is the one, that was the most varied task that I pulled. That is the one at ISU we're struggling with most consistency. And actually for us, it's rubric 13, which is how students will use the feedback, will be given opportunities to use feedback. So that's our lowest scoring rubric, is rubric 13 with that. Questions for me, commentaries. We're going to be continuing our exploration of EdTPA next time. I think what will happen then, we're going to work with these same materials. So we're going to be going back to this task 1 again, and we're going to be going through more of the rubrics to look at evaluating performance and how we do that. So we'll be walking through. We should be able to go at a quicker pace because you'll have more familiarity with the materials available to you and what's happening there and how to navigate that. In the meantime, I would highly recommend going through some of these rubrics, kind of giving an overview of each task based on the rubrics, especially that instruction task where it starts getting into rubric 7 is all about engaging students in learning. Take a look at what your content area wants them to engage in. Take a look at your subject-specific pedagogy. Take a look at those things so you start to gain familiarity with what your teacher candidates are going to need to do. Conversations you'll be having this spring. What are the expectations? Where are you already doing this stuff? I have seen some of you already starting to map stuff out because that's exactly what I would be doing right now. So I completely understand that. Is some of the language need to be changed? I was talking with this group over here. We had simple things like they talk about instructional supports all through task 1. Our students had no clue what that was. There's a very easy change to be made early in programs, but it's a change that, again, if it's not made when they get to the student teaching semester, it's very confusing. And we don't need anything else to be confusing during student teaching, right? I mean, they're already having to figure out where the copy machine is and that type of stuff. And I know that sounds flippant, but it really is navigating a school and figuring out all that other stuff. They don't need this to be on top of it.
I understand what you're thinking, but what happens when they get to a school and their cooperating teachers don't have this language at all?
Well, and that's right.
Language, and then they're in a school where that's not.
That's fine, but that's one less obstacle to overcome. So in other words, what I'm saying is you don't want the EdTPA language to be an obstacle to working on the assessment. That would be my argument. You know, there are barriers to performance. You want to make sure you break down as many of them as possible. And you can say things like, these things go by these terms: instructional supports, materials. It's that all of these mean the same thing. Doesn't mean you have to exclude other language. It means you should think about including the language so they understand the synonymity. Oh, I don't know what I just did with that word. But anyways, that these things are synonymous with each other. That was much better with that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. Somewhere in my brain, though, it's saying something else.
Okay. Let's wait and see if that part.
Exposed to certain terms, it's going to throw them when they get out there. They're going to be, what are you talking about? I don't know those terms. Because they learned to only use terms.
Well, then don't have it be only those terms. Have it be multiple terms. But understand that the students need to know these are all synonymous with each other. Right. That these are all this is all the same thing. Performance expectations the same. We found specifically in reflections, we were not asking them to dig deep enough and provide enough evidence. So our clinical reflections have greatly changed based on rubric 10 and 15, which we'll get into those later. You can explore them all you want. But, you know, our clinical reflections, you know, how did the lesson go? That question has very much changed. Showing evidence of what you're talking about, those types of things. Adaptations need to be made. What aspects are not being addressed? And looking at that. And those are interesting conversations you all will be having. I might be in on them. I may not be. We'll see. But in terms of that. So there will be a link to, in the PowerPoint you were sent, if you can fill out the feedback form for scale. So you all received a PowerPoint, yes? Okay, if you don't remember, talk to Will.
It's in the Dropbox, actually.
Or it's in the Dropbox. There we go. I'm more efficient than I even remember. I put the PowerPoint in there.
Yeah.
There you go.
And we'll be